Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I am so excited about today's guest because I want to tell you the one line that when I saw this about his work and about his business, I said, yes, that's our secret weapon to growth. Here's what I saw about today's guest's business. He wrote about his work. We give growing businesses the same data intelligence capabilities that helped IBM and Capital One drive billions in growth at a fraction of the cost. And if that perks your ears right up, then you're absolutely going to love today's guest. His name is Graeme Crawford. Graeme spent his 20-year corporate career helping Fortune 100 companies profit from disruptive new technology. In July of 2024, he left his executive role at one of the biggest banks in the United States to follow his entrepreneurial dream. I'm so excited to hear about that leap. Since then, he's been building data-driven internet businesses that harness the power of the AI revolution. So today's episode, when I look forward to my conversation with Graeme today, I really think about the intersection of technology, of data, of AI, and most importantly, this guy loves tangible business growth. So we're all in for a treat. I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Graeme Crawford. All right, Graeme, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Brian. How are you today?
I am great. Obviously, you and I were talking footy off screen, but now we're sitting here talking business together. You've got to take us beyond the bio. Who's Graeme? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
Yeah, I've been chasing cool things most of my career, and it's led me on a really interesting path that I'm excited to share with you and share with your listeners as well. I spent the majority of my career so far in the world of corporate, which might seem strange coming on this podcast, but I planned my escape, as I call it, into the world of entrepreneurship, having spent a number of years basically at large companies, being what I would call an intrapreneur, coming up with new ideas to make the business better, make the business more money, add value to the business, pitching them internally and pushing them. So I recognized the patterns and then realized that I wanted to make the jump. So I spent a couple of years building up some reserves, making a plan for what it was I was going to do, and then finally took the leap towards the middle of last year. I took a few months off and then got rolling just towards the end of last year. So I'm brand new into the space, and I've found the entrepreneur community like so welcoming, so empowering, and it's a great place to be. And I finally feel like I've found my natural home.
Yeah, I love that overview, Graeme. I want to start with the entrepreneurial comment because as someone obviously from the outside looking into the world of corporate, I never really have had a corporate job for any amount of time. I love that intrapreneurship has taken off. I'm super curious, within the corporate world, what's that distinction? How do they recognize the intrapreneurs out there? Because I'll tell you this, Graeme, before I kick it back to you. From my perspective, I imagine the intrapreneurs saying, no, why are we doing it this way? Let's do it this way. Let's try these new things. I just picture it as someone who challenges that status quo, but I'd love to hear from you the role of the intrapreneur in today's corporate environment.
Yeah, there's space for it, and every environment needs people who are going to push the boundaries and imagine and push for ways to be done differently, and take those bigger leaps. And I had a lot of success with it internally. It works a lot like it does in the external world. You go to the folks who control the budget, the qualified buyers, if you will, and you push your idea, talk about where the return on value is going to be, and assuming you can create this idea in the situation where there's going to be multiple X return on the value, then they go for it and you get to spend a couple of years delivering things. And I did that with a couple of really cool data projects inside some really large companies. There was a podcast I listened to. It was a Modern Wisdom episode with Rory Sutherland, and he, with hindsight, positioned the world of entrepreneurship very differently as where the risk-reward balance isn't quite as rewarding as it might be for those of us now on the outside. You see, effectively inside the performance management culture of a big corporation, it's a zero-sum game, right? Only so many people can get promoted. Performance ratings are distributed according to a normal distribution. So there's a risk, right? We're outside, we start a company, we make a push. Sometimes the pitch doesn't get accepted. Sometimes it doesn't work out. The lower probability of success, higher risk ventures inside a corporation. If they come off and you end up making the company multiples on profit, then you get a pat on the back, a promotion, and maybe a nice bonus that year. Compared to the amount of money that makes the company, it's not a huge percentage share. And then the flip side of that internally, and luck willing, this never happened to me, but internally, if you make one of those pushes and it doesn't pay off and you don't make your boss look good, then you get fired. So from a risk reward perspective, entrepreneurship in the corporate environment is, I'd say, harder in some ways because of that risk reward balance isn't off. It doesn't quite match the return that you get if you can land something externally. So as someone who spent time in both environments, that's one of the things that jumped out to me first in hindsight, having come out of it.
Yeah, with that in mind, Graeme, it's fun because hearing the overview of your entrepreneurial journey and you taking that leap, what I always think back to is that term that we have in the world of entrepreneurship, golden handcuffs. And I only worked in corporate for 10 months. It was in healthcare. It was right when I graduated college, so not very much experience, but I already got to experience the thrill of having a weekly paycheck. You talk about that risk reward. You can also be less risky if you want to in a corporate environment. If you're not an entrepreneur driving that sort of change, where was your head at? Did you have those golden handcuffs? Because it seems to me like, I mean, you use the word plan, that you were planning that escape. Where did that desire come from?
Yeah, and it took me a while to unpick them. And, large corporations have a number of priorities that they have to balance in protection of the business and the business's overall objectives and the shareholders. So sometimes great innovation is harder to land and harder to get momentum behind because there's an underlying risk management thing going on. Like, you already have a massive corporation, and so you have something to protect, and you want to make sure the business is well managed and doesn't take unnecessary risks. So it can be harder to land those more ambitious things or get support for those more ambitious things. That's one of them. And then the golden handcuffs, I actually refer to it as the golden cage. Similar idea, but I like the idea of being the bird flying free on the other side of it. You get locked into a couple of things. So first, psychologically, I refer to the promotion ladder and the ways that rank works internally. You get conditioned into that internal reward system, which then becomes everything to you, of like, what can I do to get the next promotion? How do I chase this? How do I make this? How do I get this dopamine rush? This is the only thing that's important to me. And you don't realize that deep within a corporation, if you're a senior this or a junior this or a executive this or whatever it might be, it actually just turns to dust when you leave, but you get so locked into that internal reward system that you don't see that. And the second part of the golden handcuffs for me is the restricted stock units that get awarded, as you ascend into the executive levels of these big corporations, and they vest over a number of years, and it becomes an increasingly painful thing to separate from. Like, your hands get a little bit cut on the way out of the golden handcuffs, if you like, from the scratches of escaping. But the other thing that I've reflected on, and there's a lot happening in the world that we don't need to go down that rabbit hole. But the other thing, which is potentially a mirage in the world of corporate, is this concept of security. The weekly paycheck comes, or the bi-weekly paycheck comes, and health insurance is covered, and all of these lovely things are taken care of. But obviously, at any point in time, as soon as you're no longer required for whatever the priority objectives of the company are, then that security gets cut very quickly. And I think we saw some big tech companies in particular be particularly ruthless with this in the past 2 to 3 years, of like, suddenly your access is off, and then in whatever period of time they deem appropriate, suddenly all of that security is gone and folks don't have it anymore. So there's a bit of a mirage around the security as well. So all of those things, I began to recognize the patterns, and I worked towards it. I realized I'd need a little bit of a war chest to approach entrepreneurship, and I can talk about why I think that's so important in terms of the approach, because I think you need to, coming into entrepreneurship, you need to shed the connection with never wanting to take any risk. And in fact, in my short experience so far, as well as all the many stories that that have been shared with me by other really generous entrepreneurs within the community, so an aversion to taking risk can be a real blocker to growth, and can actually be a cause of failure if you try and hedge your bets and you approach clients from a risk-averse perspective, or you approach your own company from a risk-averse perspective, that it can actually hold you back.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful point that you just made there, Graeme, because I think that a lot of entrepreneurs operate in survival mode, which really the stuff that you're introducing us to here today, that's the root of survival mode. And I really appreciate your candor about the way that the corporate environment works and how, chasing that dopamine, they always have that carrot dangling in front of you. And so I'm super excited to hear about that transition that you've made, not only career-wise, not only work-wise, but especially mindset-wise, because this is the powerful stuff. And it sounds like you've already sought out your entrepreneurial circle that has really helped you to elevate that part of the game. When I hear you talk about that corporate dopamine that they're always hunting, I know just looking at your career to date is that you're obviously a very high achiever. You've done it at companies who are leaders in their industry. And with that in mind, I think back to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, the great Manchester United former player and former manager, where he once said mountains are there to be climbed. And Graeme, I would imagine that you thrive on those mountains that are there to be climbed because you've replaced the corporate dopamine of those promotions, those raises, those stock vestings. What are those new mountains that you're looking to climb within the entrepreneurial mindset?
Yeah, I love the new mountains. And I couldn't help but pick up that you said Ole was a great player, and then you didn't add an adjective to his managerial tenure. So I'll I'll let that one fly. But you win the Champions League in injury time, you'll always be a hero no matter what you do, I'm sure. But the new brand of dopamine and the new mountains, I find them much more suitable to what I want to do. And the dopamine for me is if I can structure a deal, and I've done a number of deals with partners, actually, entrepreneurs with other companies. Like I've structured a couple of deals where we go in together. So if you can create a situation where you're creating a winning, you're getting a win for the client, you're getting a win for your the partner company you're going in with, you get a win for yourself, and you get a win for your clients' customers. It's perfectly possible to stack all those wins up in a row, and nobody has to lose, right? If I compare it back to the world of promotions and that paradigm, somebody has to win. Like there's only a certain percentage of promotions, there's only a certain percentage of the top bonuses that are available. So for you to get it, other people have to not get it. But in the world of entrepreneurship, we can genuinely pursue the win-win-win-win scenarios where everything, and there's no shortage of opportunity, there's never a shortage of opportunity. So that when I've made those come through, like that feels like the ultimate dopamine. Like you build the trust, you build the knowledge of the client, you build the knowledge of the client's customer, you apply your expertise to it and come up with a situation where everyone can win. There's nothing like it. I haven't found anything in my many years in corporate that matched that kind of feeling.
Yes, so well said. Welcome to the abundance world of entrepreneurship. All of you listeners seeing Graeme's breakthroughs here. Obviously, he's in his first year of entrepreneurship, but you can already see how much he's dove into this world. And Graeme, it's just a huge testament to the quality of work that you do, the service and the solutions that you bring to the table. And on that note, I do want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the actual nature of your work, because I'm so fascinated. I feel like big business we always look at as having an unfair advantage because they've got access to resources that us small guys just don't have, Graeme. And so I love it. You heard me tease it at the very top of today's episode, that notion of what you do, of bringing those winning formulas from those Fortune 100 companies you've worked inside of and helped to drive growth inside of those to small businesses at that enterprise grade level. Talk to us about the nature of the work that you bring and what you saw that works there that now you're applying to businesses of all sizes.
Yeah, thanks for the setup. And I think the other thing I would add is the timing of this. Like the timing of it couldn't be better with the explosion of the world of AI and all of the great technology that's enabled off the back of the cloud computing era, where processing and storage costs began to approach zero in terms of affordability. So there's bad news and good news, I would say. So the bad news for the growing companies is that, of course, the resources and budgets and ability to deal with a bit of pain on the P&L is much larger for those big companies. In fact, I even had one of my clients concerned about that. I remember them actually say to me, like, by the way, you should know, like, we can't, your first step in this engagement can't be to hire a $1 million team of software engineers to approach this, which again, in the old world would have been something that would have been possible. So one of the learnings I've had to take on myself over the last year is how to adjust these approaches for a different budget environment and a different type of world. So it's not quite a lift and shift. We can't just lift and shift the same approach of like spending millions of dollars to make things better. But the principles remain the same, especially in the data space. So many decisions are still, like, in companies all across the world, including the bigger ones, like made on instinct and feeling, and because we used to do it this way, and not enough on data. And sometimes that's because the data doesn't exist. Sometimes that's because the data does exist, but it's so disorganized and all over the place that we can't get it together in a way that is provides enough intelligence or insight for us to act upon. And sometimes the data tells us a story that we don't want to hear, or it doesn't support the particular initiative that the highest paid person wants to be the path forward. So sometimes data, and again, this also happens in big companies too, gets shoved to the other side. But even without the $1 million teams, especially in the advent of AI and all of the capabilities that's democratized, I'd say, across the sort of small and medium-sized business, now is the best type of time to be doing this work, because of the gap and the access to capability is closing. AI is still nascent, and it's in being proven as something that you can build an entire business on and give really critical decisions to. In fact, I would heartily advise against that at this stage, but the gap is closing, and in terms of operational efficiency, in terms of ability to make decisions, in terms of being able to wrangle data to get it in the right place, to get it of the right quality, so that you can make the best quality decisions from it. That technology and that capability is more accessible now than it ever has been before to small and medium businesses. So that has helped me close that gap and apply some of those Fortune 100 magic tricks and wonderful patterns into the growing the growth business space.
Yeah, Graeme, hearing you talk about that, and obviously just imagining our listener base, we're being listened to by business owners from all across the world at all different stages of their own growth journeys. And they might hear, you called it out, obviously you've got your finger on the pulse in this world, that a lot of business owners might feel like they don't have the same mountains of data that big businesses have. I think about the Capital Ones of the world. They're not assessing millions of visits to their website via Google Analytics. They have millions of actual customers that they have real life data on. Plus, they've got all their web traffic, marketing, conversions, the technology that powers their platform. They have all of this. What are those data points that you look at in everyday businesses outside of the Fortune 500 that you say, hey, people probably don't even realize that they can and they should be tapping into these data points?
Yeah, I know all about those because I used to look after all those data sets in particular. You mentioned Google Analytics, and I've come across businesses who don't even look at the Google Analytics. There's a wealth of information there. And even beyond those obvious measures that people would look at, I say obvious, that should be becoming less obvious. Things like page views and unique visitors, engagement time. Many people only skim the surface of the Google Analytics data set, and they might look at monthly page views. That's typical of most growing businesses. They'll monitor monthly page views and see that either go up or go down. The quality of that information is actually one of the things that's being challenged in the world of AI, because as you'll see now, if you go and search anywhere, Google through Gemini, or people are Perplexity's trying to pull people in, or sometimes people will go to GPT or even Claude, now that's internet connected as well, and they will get the answer to their question there. So actually website visits is becoming more and more of just a vanity metric, and less valuable, because many people, or an increasing number of people, are getting answers about your business or about the types of service you provide from those you kind of AI banner answers at the top. So some websites are actually seeing traffic go down and business go up because they're being smart about how they place on there. Beyond that, there are companies out there who are using Google Analytics very well, but there's a wealth of data about their customers or their internal infrastructure or how things are operating within their business that just aren't tracked, or they haven't got the appropriate strategy set up to track them. So I always say this to all my clients: data and technology in themselves never constitute a business case. It can never be a business case for a piece of data and technology. And this might sound strange coming from me, but data and tech themselves can never be the reason. Like, oh, we want to be on the latest database, or in this modern era, we want to use AI. Like, there needs to be a why behind that. Like, what are you trying to make better about your business, and how is that either going to grow your revenue or reduce your costs or improve your customer experience or reduce your risk, or one of those other really important reasons. So any technology or data project that I undertake has to be driven from a business perspective. And I've found that I've added a lot of value with my clients, maybe unexpectedly in that space. I think they come in and we can do the technical wizardry, and we can architect the right technology and the right platforms to solve the answer. But often the two critical pieces in the areas that we operate in are, number one, like, what is the business strategy, and how can we create the right KPIs, objectives, metrics, whatever each business wants to call it, to accurately describe how we want the business to move. And then how can we source, find, aggregate, compile, whatever it might be, the data to assess how we're doing against that. So that's often the big challenge that folks aren't expecting. And then the second challenge, I'll say, actually, with many technology and data projects that me and my company provide a lot of value in, is the change management, the leadership and change management in the communication. And, for all of the things I've said about corporate, I don't think I would have done my career any other way. I think the lessons I've learned, all of the skills that I've built up from a leadership, people management, awareness of how big business operates by being involved in so many different aspects of it, I think is a critical factor in the success that I've had as an entrepreneur. And sure enough, the time I spent rolling out amazing new data platforms in big companies, a lot of that was actually winning the hearts and minds, thinking about the humans on the other end of the data, how that's going to change their jobs, how that's going to change how they use data, how that's going to change how they report on things and how they measure their own progress, and actually managing that cultural shift that's required. Because technology, data, whatever it might be, if the people who you're expecting to change, if they feel like something's been done to them rather than for them or with them, then they will resist. And however well-intended or valuable or profitable your data or technology initiative might be, it's far more likely to fail if those folks aren't bought in. So that's the other critical skill that I've learned. Once you've rolled out something across 50,000 people, rolling it across a smaller number of people starts to become a little easier. You can go and talk to all of them, for one. But those are the two things that I think a lot of businesses underestimate when thinking about how to use data and technology to make their business better.
Yeah, Graeme, I love the fact that here we are talking about data intelligence and AI and technology, but you've brought it back to the business use cases and the humans behind it. I think that that's such an important thing that we're emphasizing, and huge kudos to you for giving us these insights. I want to pick on one of the verbs that you use there, though. You talked about using data to assess. And the thing that I always hear when I talk to entrepreneurs at all different levels is we've all heard the power of data. We all know that thanks to AI, we are more empowered to use that data than ever before. But I feel like people get lost in, are we using or are we using data to be predictive? Are we using it to make sense of things that have happened in the past so that we have that more informed base to move forward? When you talk about assessing it, why are we assessing it, Graeme? Is it that future looking, the backwards looking, all of the above? Give us some of those use cases.
Yeah, I'll make a recommendation and refer back to this Modern Wisdom episode, the most recent one with Rory Sutherland, and he summed this up so beautifully. Like we entrepreneurs, business owners, all want to believe deep down that the business is a deterministic endeavor, that we can take past performance, draw a line through those dots on a scatter chart, and perfectly predict what's going to happen, be it from a revenue, profit perspective, number of customers, website visits, whatever it might be. We want to be able to perfectly predict it. But to steal Rory's words and to quote him directly, weird shit happens, right? In the world, in business, inherently it's unpredictable. And much as we'd like to believe that business is perfectly predictable, it's a probabilistic endeavor rather than a deterministic one. So when we use data to inform and we consult it to see what the right way forward is, we're trying to make the best possible decision with the information currently available to us. And that's why establishing great quality data that's well managed and well governed is so important, because the data at any one point in time might tell you one thing. The next day or the next week or the next month, it might tell you something different. So actually simplifying and automating those flows is such a critically important thing to do for any business.
Yeah, such an important takeaway, as I'm a little out of focus here. Graeme, I want to switch gears a little bit. Towards the end of these conversations, I always love talking to not only you as the subject matter expert, but you as the entrepreneur, because making this transition, it's so clear to me, Graeme. It's funny how many times you've said, you're new-ish in this journey, but so many things that I'm hearing from you today, you're obviously far accelerated. And obviously a lot of it is off the back of the career that you've had. It sounds like the people that you've met, and you've been proactive in finding your entrepreneurial circle. But one thing that stands out, and I can't let you go without giving us some more insights there, is these partnerships, the strategic collaborations with others. Give us some insights there, because it's probably the biggest lesson that I learned in my first few years of being an entrepreneur, is that a rising tide lifts all boats. I say it so frequently here on the air, and I think it's important for all of us as entrepreneurs to embrace that. So I'd love to hear some of those examples and experiences.
Yeah, there are. It's easy to get caught up in the desperation of like doing. So the lesson that I'd read in so many books that so many people had told me that I had to learn for myself is if you try and be all things to all people, you end up being nothing to anybody. And sure enough, I think when I was first pitching my business, I was very kind of broad in terms of what I offered and who I offered it to, and the people weren't coming. But yeah, as soon as I narrowed that niche and said, okay, I do these specific things for this specific type of company in this specific situation, the pipeline then started flowing. Interestingly, including with lots of companies who didn't fit that niche definition, which I defined, like many other boats washed up on the beachhead, and we've been able to put great deals together. So that was the construct from which the partnerships just seemed like an obvious step to me, because sometimes you get into a company, you start to understand and discover their needs. And that's the way I typically contract with my clients. I have a discovery period just to establish, I can't prescribe the perfect data architecture for a year's time without getting to know your business. So typically I'll do a discovery phase before an implementation phase, two separate contracts. And sometimes during that discovery phase, you come across things that would add a whole lot of value to the client that don't sit anywhere near your wheelhouse in terms of your company or your market or what you offer. So you're then faced with a choice. Like, do I expand my aperture and try and go back to doing all things for all people, even though I know that a specialist company or a specialist team will likely do this better? And yeah, the answer is no, right? It's much easier to partner with somebody else. You then create opportunity in the ecosystem for somebody else. Your client then gets somebody who's the best at what they do in that specific area. And like I said at the beginning, you can create the win-win for everyone to do it. And once you burst past this risk aversion and the scarcity mindset that holds people down, that many people are taught and trained into in the corporate environment, which I referenced before, the scarcity mindset of like, how do I keep my job and stop being in the bottom however many percent that get fired, versus how do I stretch forward and like shoot for the stars, like you always see people get better outcomes internally. But the theme I would cover, or probably the most valuable lesson I had, and this is going to be an interesting one for you. I actually got many, many years ago my first ever job when I was 16 years old, and I was working in McDonald's of all places. and I'd gone through and passed the test and got my stars. Such a high achiever, like you said, love 5-star employee at McDonald's. And, I was on the verge of transitioning to being like a customer service manager or a front counter manager, the one of the people that walks around in the shirt. And, they were kind of hesitating on it. And my manager then said to me at the time, like, you could, if you wait for permission to lead, then you'll always be waiting. Like, that permission never comes. And that's been a lesson that stuck with me throughout my entire career and been incredibly valuable. And I would say it's true for everyone, corporate environment, entrepreneur, kids at school, whatever, like at a sports team. If you wait for permission to lead, no one's ever going to grant it to you. It's never going to come. But realizing it's a permissionless environment, and you can become that permissionless leadership apprentice or even a permissionless leader and step in and provide that structure, that vision, that inspiration for people, then you'll always enjoy amazing results. And that, I found that with my path into entrepreneurship. No one ever gives you permission to become an entrepreneur, but nobody's stopping you either. Like, you just need to have the courage of your convictions and step into it. And that's what I've applied to that partnership mindset. Like, my clients don't come to me and say, "Oh, can you find a company to partner with?" But I don't need their permission to lead or their permission to come up with something that's going to be incredibly valuable to them, especially when I've been introduced to so many fantastic people. So I go out, I make the proposal, and more often than not, if it's rooted in business value and provides that win-win-win situation all around, then people are usually really keen to go for it.
Yes, Graeme, I love that. The permissionless leader. That's something that I'm really going to take away from today's conversation. Although I think you've made your life very difficult ahead of this final question, because you've dropped so many nuggets of knowledge on us. And the last question that I always ask in these interviews is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners? Knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, and also knowing that you are one of us. You are a fellow entrepreneur that is far beyond your years in the game, by the way, Graeme. I must say, as someone who interviews entrepreneurs for a living. So with all of that in mind, what's that one piece of advice that you want to leave listeners with today?
Yeah, I mean, I knowing that I was on the ramp, like, I read a lot of books, I listened to a lot of podcasts, and I did a lot of work on myself as well, like growing growing the thickness of skin, and beyond the permission thing. And I think that these two might be linked, and this is related to validation. So, and again, in family life, in the corporate environment, in the world of entrepreneurs, I think this advice works all the way across. But the most powerful thing that you can ever do is free yourself from a requirement to be validated by other people. And we spoke back to the golden handcuffs, and one of the things that makes that promotion, exceeding expectations rating thing incredibly hard to walk away from, because not only does it provide dopamine, but it provides that external validation of like, oh, you actually are worthwhile and you're doing a good job and you're adding value. If you can free yourself from that and just recognize that your capabilities and your inherent skills and the time you invest in yourself and growing your capabilities should be validation enough. And I'll steal a Hormozyism here. Now I've got the official entrepreneur badge from you, Brian. I feel allowed to do this. Then you can build yourself, instead of focusing your mind on getting validation from other people, if instead you can focus your mind on building yourself a stack of irrefutable proof that you are valuable and that any company would be incredibly lucky to contract with you if it's the right time and space and your services fit. If you can motivate and push yourself with your own set of proof, then the sky's the limit in terms of what you can achieve.
Yes, so well said. Graeme, this is why there's so many wise minds out there that we get to learn from. I love that you pulled that advice in from Alex Hormozy as well. You really take me back to, I love Seth Godin as well. He's been a big influence on me, and he talks about the tyranny of being picked. And it just ties in so much with all the wisdom that you've shared with us here today about don't wait for anybody else to pick you. In fact, you don't need to be picked by anybody or anything. You get to pick you. And Graeme, I think that you're such the epitome of that, not only having a successful career yourself, but saying, yeah, I did all of those things, and I have so much more to offer to so many different clients and businesses. So huge kudos to you in the work that you're doing, the way that you're building your business, the way that you're creating those win-win-win opportunities. So I know that listeners will be keen to check out your website and go deeper into all this work. So drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn. Just search my name. It's cool. I have the blessing and the curse of an uncommonly spelled name, so it should be easy to find on there. You can visit my website at www.crawfordmcmillan.com, and the link will be somewhere down there, I'm sure.
Yes, making my life easy as a podcast host, Graeme. I love it because listeners, you already know the drill. We're dropping all of those links down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. So you can click right on through. You don't have to remember how to spell Graeme's name. You can just click right on through to his personal LinkedIn as well as his website. Don't be shy in reaching out. I would actually argue in today's episode, you saw more than in most others how much Graeme loves connecting with other entrepreneurs, loves expanding his circle. So if you want to continue that conversation, do not be shy. Take him up on it. Hit those links down below. Otherwise, Graeme, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Brian. It's great to be here. I appreciate you, genial host.